Okay, what to do when it all goes wrong. Now, I just had somebody in the comments who had been to their first ultra race in Croatia. Somebody from the UK, flown over there, invested in the flights, the race entry, the hotels, the cost of being there, the training, the sacrifice on the months leading up to it. For all I know, it's his first. It is his first ultra race and his first ultra trail race, and it's a qualifying race for other things in the season. And so it's important for him. He's a quick runner. It's important for him to get that right. And in his head, it would have been building up to that. There's some nervousness, there's anxiousness. Is it going to go right? What am I expecting? There's an elite field there. There's competition. You know, it's a new arena, and so you're expecting a lot of yourself. And if you're in distance running, and if you're trying to get the best of yourself, you're always expecting to be moving forward, always. And so when something goes wrong, when there's a curveball or an obstacle, we're relatively good at dealing with these things because it happens all the time in training. And it's kind of part and parcel of building a schedule, building a race schedule, and then hitting everything. You're not going to hit them all out of the park. And so when it goes wrong, psychologically, it affects us. And, you know, physically, he's not damaged, he's not injured. But from what I've seen in the comments, there was a downhill start, which is, you know, a little bit strange, especially if you're coming from the road, or especially if you're coming from the UK, and there's not many places where you can start up and kind of work down. The downhill start, his heart rate, he's been monitoring his watch, his heart rate has gone like sky high. And then to an uphill, 400 meter uphill, which is nothing, and it's gone through the roof. And that's, you know, caused him to pull out at the first aid station. What I'd say is this: first of all, don't panic, because it's part and parcel of racing. It's really frustrating when you've invested the time, the money, etc. to be in there. You're expecting big things of yourself, which says a lot about you anyway. These things are going to happen. What I will say is you've got to protect yourself as much as possible. So essentially, it's like risk management. If I'm going to fly, and I've flown all over the world to do different races, and I've done stupid things like fly from Thailand to the Middle East, to Europe, across to America, to Flagstaff, and then, of course, what I'm expecting what of my body? Of course, you know, you've got to set yourself up for success. And in this case, it's only UK to Croatia. And it's not a long trail race, but it's something that's very different. And so you've got to set yourself up for success. For him, he's already done that in my eyes. He's already got there the Wednesday before, the Tuesday before. And so I had plenty of days to kind of get the flight out of his legs, start running really easy. The taper seems to have gone well, 3 weeks taper. I'd suggest shortening that a little bit, because marathon, you maybe got to test that. What works for you? Is it kind of 10 days? 9 days, 10 days works really well for me. And the longer you go, the less taper you need, because your body is expecting to go longer and it's ready to go longer, and you're trying to prepare yourself to run as fast and as far as you can on one specific day, or as fast as you possibly can for the distance. What I'd say is don't go off the watch too much. And the best time to use your watch is when you're doing lactate threshold sessions or interval sessions where you're trying to do VO2 max intervals or whatever, or when you're trying to do recovery days and you're trying to make sure that that's low enough. When you start a race and you've got GPS satellites everywhere and it's linked to everybody else's watch, your heart rate strap might be doing crazy things. Just ignore it if it's kind of crazy for a little bit. It doesn't mean all of a sudden, because we've got that data on our wrist and it's so accessible to us, all of a sudden we can kind of get a little bit of a hypochondriac. We can think that our heart is going to explode, but in actual fact, you probably come completely fine. It's happened to me in big city marathons when, you know, the watch data is doing crazy things. You do a 2-minute kilometer and you're like, how is that going to affect my pace? The heart rate is out of control. I've had that before, and you've kind of just got to calm down and think, how do I feel? And okay, I might have gone into the red because I'm super excited. I might not have slept great the night before, and all of a sudden my body is doing crazy things. It will settle down if you give it time. He might have done the right thing in terms of dropping out and saving it. And now he's kind of panicking because he's got Transvolcania in 30 days. It will be sort of 28, 29 days. What may happen, and the best advice I can possibly give you, just chalk that up and get ready for the next race. So get yourself off the taper mode and get yourself back into training. Let the body see over the next 2 to 2.5 weeks. Let the body see what it's actually doing. I think you've already done some blood tests, so great that you kind of go in deep dive in that much. I would want to see what comes back from those. Of course you will. But even so, just chalk it up to a bad day. You've done 1,000 training runs, you've done lots of races before. It's not because it's an ultra race, it's maybe because it's the traveling, if you're not used to traveling. The flight is always different, the food's a little bit different, what you're drinking, your preparation before the race is slightly different. So what I'd always say is, take your breakfast with you. If you're gonna book a hotel, make sure you've got a cooking facility so you can cook exactly what you want in for the breakfast, whether it's porridge, for me it's always a banana smoothie because you can get bananas pretty much everywhere in the world. I can blend those up in water an hour before the race and I'm good to go. So kind of work your training, work your long runs and your interval sessions around what the breakfast that you would do, and also kind of the gel and nutrition system, make sure that that's trained for, so your stomach's ready to take that in. It's obviously that's not the problem in this case. It's elevated heart rate that's kind of led into panic a little bit, or is not feeling right, or a combination of the two things. And psychologically, your brain can trick you. If you see your heart rate and it's way up there, and all of a sudden you're thinking, I came to kind of win this race, which I think he has, and I've been there many times when you come to win the race and all of a sudden you're not feeling great and you're like, today is not going to be an A+ day, but you've got to think, what can I do? How can I salvage this? How can I maybe kind of come out with a B- or a B+? How can I turn this rate? And especially in ultra races, you get more than one bite of the cherry. So you might not have a perfect 5K, 10K lead in starting the race, but what really matters is that second half of the race. The 70K especially is a really great distance where I've seen people go off super fast in the first 35K, and then the second 35K, I do this really great trail race in Seville that is exactly that distance. And the amount of times when I've messed it up in the first half and then I've come good in the second half, so yeah, you've got to give yourself time, and especially if you're new to ultra running and you're new to traveling to races, I would have taken the experience as much as you can. If you needed to stop for a second, just reassess the situation. Just think, shit, I'm not gonna win this race like I wanted to, or the confidence is kind of, it needs to kick in at some point, and you need to think, okay, what is actually happening with my body? Is there anything that I should be doing differently? And let's kind of continue. Let's get maybe a good training run out of this, because I don't want all the money I've invested and the time I've invested in getting here, the time you've spent kind of getting off work or university in order to be there, you don't want that to be wasted. So how do you get the absolute most out of that day? I would have continued on and done a training run. And then maybe, if that's a 20K training run, and then maybe you got 50K to go, and then you start to feel good about yourself. You're still taking the nutrition as if you're gonna go for 70K, because that's the training run that you would be doing anyway. That's the long run, that's the kind of, a 20K tempo runner, effort in zone maybe 3 or zone 2. And then you try to bring the heart rate down, and then you realize you're looking at a watch, oh, heart rate's starting to adjust now and starting to get back to what it should be. Maybe I'm gonna go again. And maybe that was the silver lining, to get to the 20K mark, 25K mark, and realize, got 45K, 50K to go, and I feel great all of a sudden. That happens a lot, and please sort of like, take this with my experience. There's many times when it's not all going to plan, and you need to kind of like salvage something. And sometimes you really surprise yourself, and it might have felt awful to begin with. You might think, oh, something's like seizing up, something's like elevated heart rate, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, your stomach is often a big one, where your stomach's all over the show, and then you take a bathroom break, and you come back and you feel light, you feel great, and everything's working again. So do what you can in those situations to salvage the life lesson more than the race. It might be that you need to go, do you know what? It's not an A+ day. I'm not going to win the race, but what can I get out of this? Can I get on the podium? Can I get in the top 5, top 10? And that might not be in your character, but if I could have my time back again, I'd work towards those situations with a much more sort of bigger picture approach, where it's like, actually, I've pulled out of a lot of races where I could have continued, and for me the thinking was, and this applies to your race right now, and your race schedule, is my thinking has always been, I'm not going to do what I said I would do in this race, and even though I've traveled here, and I would only do this if it was a local race, but even though I've traveled here for the race, I'm not going to get what I wanted out of it. So even because I don't feel great, and therefore stopping and actually going for like full power towards the next race, and not having this soreness, this dullness, this recovery process, and then going again. Because to be able to do 69K and then 4 weeks later or 30 days later to do Transvolcania, that's a bit much in itself. I don't know what distance exactly you're doing at Transvolcania, but that's a bit much in itself. So maybe your approach could have been changed a little bit to use this as use the 69k in Croatia as a training race ready for Transvolcania. Maybe that's what you were trying to do, and that's not gone to plan. But I think you were trying to place highly in this race, even if it was competitive, and then go full confidence on Transvolcania. Sometimes you can bite off more than you can chew, and there are athletes that we all look to that seem as if they're, you know, just bulletproof, and they can do this kind of thing. But especially if you're new to the game, there's a level that you can go and win, I think, 5-6 races, ultra races a year, quite comfortably, every 2 months, and keep it going. If you try to do too much, you usually get found out pretty quickly. In the workplace, that will take a long time, and you'll get burnt out, and it will look nasty, and it'll look nasty for quite some time, because it's difficult to pull those back. In running, because it's so physical and because the motion is so repetitive, you'll get found out in terms of you'll get injured very quickly. So avoid injury and illness like the plague, because they're not going to allow you to move forward as fast as you want. You want to feel as if you're moving forward, feel as if you're developing all the time. But what I will say is take this as, okay, moving forward with full positivity towards Transvolcania. And what I want to be doing in 30 days' time is looking back after Transvolcania with a great result and thinking, that was actually a silver lining, that I didn't feel great at the start of the Croatia 69k race, because what it allowed me to do is not do a full run there, and that might have damaged the Transvolcania race, which is a much bigger race. So make sure that you're kind of looking forward to, with the mentality of, okay, that's done and dusted, it's out of your control, how can we move forward as positively as possible to get the best out of Transvolcania? So good luck. I know what it feels like, and it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating, but it's part and parcel of the game. And you might have had lots of luck with your racing, and you might have kind of like got some great wins. You've got some quick times. You're obviously doing great sessions. I've seen that from your comments. You're doing great sessions, but it doesn't mean that you can't like rework the thinking here and think, do you know what? It's not like 10k running or half marathon running, where I can be running a half marathon every 2 to 3 weeks and still kind of nailing another one in 2 to 3 weeks. You've got to be a little bit more strategic in terms of picking the races. Work with a good coach if you can. Work with somebody experienced, ideally even better, and ideally both together. And yeah, good luck. If you've got any comments, questions, if you completely disagree with me as well, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, good luck, and it's all to play for in Transvolcania. You've got fresh legs, and yeah, good luck.